Number 17, we're asked to find the roots. So roots is the same as x-intercepts, so I know that's where f of x or y is equal to 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is set the equation equal to 0. So I have 0 equals 4x squared plus 8x minus 5. Then from here, in order to solve or find the roots, I need to possibly factor, and if factoring doesn't work, I'd have to apply the quadratic formula. So the factoring method I would use here is method 3. Since there's 3 terms, multiply the first and last number. Always write the positive answer. So that's 20. So in my factor list, I'm going to be subtracting the numbers because that's a minus in front of the 5. And I'm looking for a pair that multiplies to 20 and then subtracts to give me my middle term 8. Well, I know 10 times 2 would give me 20, and that also subtracts to 8. So how do I get 8 positives using 10 and 2? I would need to have a negative on the 2. So because there's a 4 in front of the x squared, I'm going to have to factor by grouping. So factor by grouping, the first and last term to stay the same, but the middle term gets broken up. So my first term is 4x squared. My middle term gets broken up. Instead of 8x's, I'm using my 2 new factors here in any order. So instead of 8x's, that's 10x's minus 2x's, because if I recombine that, I get 8x's. And then minus 5, the last term stays the same. So from here, you underline your 2 groups. So my first and second group here I underline, and I factor each by finding the greatest common factor. Biggest number that divides 4 and 10 in my first group would be 2, and they both share an x. Open up my parentheses. So from here I ask myself, 2x times what would give me back to 4x squared? That would be a 2x. Bring down my plus sign, and then 2x times what gets me back to 10x? A 5. The sign that separates the 2 groups goes straight down, so that minus sign goes straight down. And for my next group, the biggest number that divides 2 and 5, that's just a 1, and they don't share anything in common in terms of variables, so I'm going to pull out just a 1. If my first parenthesis was 2x plus 5, we know for factor by grouping the second has to match, so it's 2x plus 5. And you can check by distributing the negative 1 to both terms, and that would get me back to the expanded negative 2x minus 5. So my 2 factors then come from this line that we just did. One of the factors is in matching parentheses, the 2x plus 5, and the other factor comes from what's outside, the 2x minus 1. So that becomes my second factor, 2x minus 1. So this was equal to 0. We kind of ignored that part for now while we were factoring, but our equation is equal to 0. Now that we factor this, we can apply the zero product property, which says if you're multiplying 2 quantities together, here's the first and here's the second, and your answer is 0, then either that first one, the 2x plus 5, has to be 0, or the second one, the 2x minus 1, has to be equal to 0. So we solve each 2-step equation. So for the first one, to get x alone, inverse operations always move what's not attached first, so subtract 5 from both sides. So I get 2x is equal to negative 5. One more step in order to get x alone, divide both sides by 2. So my first solution, I have negative 5 halves. My second equation, I would add 1 to both sides to isolate the x. So I have 2x equals 1. One more step in order to get x alone, divide both sides by 2. So my second solution here is 1/2. So my final answer, the 2 solutions, or 2 roots, x-intercepts, they all mean the same thing, negative 5 halves and 1/2.